Welcome back to another episode of Why Do I Do That? Today's question is, why do I struggle to receive? And then after this, it was like help, pleasure, money, which I feel like so intertwined. So not an uncommon question with women. I have worked with so many clients who struggle to receive. It is a very common woman problem. And the first thing that comes to my mind when I think about this is just this self-sacrificing learned behavior. And for me, this was quite extreme because I have come from a background of trauma and of extreme self-sacrifice of every part of me. But I think it is just also something that I've witnessed in women across all scales of trauma, that we learn to self-sacrifice. We learn to put others' needs above our own. And I do believe that part of this is kind of in our genetic makeup. Like, we're mothers, we're nurturers. It's so much easier for a woman in her feminine and a mum to, when she has a baby, to nurture, to put all of her love and time and attention into that baby. Whereas men are biologically wired to go off and provide and to have that little bit more level of disconnection so that they can leave and be able to provide. Women are the nurturers. And so what happens though is we don't just self-sacrifice for our children, we self-sacrifice for everybody. And what happens is we see our mums self-sacrificing for us, and then we grow up believing that we have to self-sacrifice for our children, but also for everybody else. And it's just this big pattern that's being played out. So we see mums and women who are overgiving, who are tired and who just keep giving and giving and giving from an empty tank. And we struggle to receive because we don't necessarily see other women and our mothers receive. And this is really a societal thing. It's not, I feel like it's getting so much better. Like, we've got women who are talking about it, who are open to it, that are putting things out there. There's so many books now about women receiving pleasure, receiving money, receiving help, building communities, things like that. It's getting so much better. But for the majority of people, it's quite ingrained that we have to put our needs on the back burner so that we can look after other people. So if I break down each of those things, why do we struggle to receive help? Often what happens with receiving help is I find a lot of my clients feel like if they accept help, they feel like they owe somebody. And there's this feeling of like, I don't want anybody to help me because I don't want to have to owe somebody something. There's also, with receiving help, there's a lot of women who, for whatever reason, whether it be trauma most of the time or just patterns and conditioning, end up in their masculine with this feeling of like, I don't need a man, I don't need help, I can do it myself, I'm an independent woman. You only have to open Instagram to see all these fucking reels and things about, I don't need a man, I'm the CEO, I'm the boss woman. Just so much tied up around I can do it all myself, I don't need a man, I don't need help, I'm independent, which on one hand I'm like, fucking amazing, love it, go girl. But on the other hand, I'm like, oh, if you can't receive help and there's an issue there with allowing receiving, and there's an issue there with allowing connection, and there is an isolation process that's happening where you're like, I don't need anyone, I'm pushing everyone away because I can do it myself. And I often find women CEOs that I work with, like women that are earning millions, that have terrible relationships because they're so protective. They push everyone aside because they're in this mentality of I can do it myself. And so they struggle to receive help because they don't want to owe anybody, because they obviously have trauma around owing somebody something or around this like tit for tat energy. So we get pushed into our masculine to do it all ourselves. And so that's a pattern that's coming from somewhere. The second part is pleasure, which is for me a huge one, because we equate pleasure with sex. As soon as I say pleasure, you think straight away about like self-pleasure, sexual pleasure. But if you think about pleasure, there's so many other pleasures. There's pleasure in every moment of every day, pleasure in eating your meal, pleasure in drinking water, pleasure in being outside in nature, in just fucking existing. And what happens is when we struggle to receive pleasure because we struggle to receive help, they kind of tie in hand, but when we struggle to receive pleasure in our sex life and in that sacral sexual area, it ripples into other areas of life. And there's a great book all about this called Pussy. And it talks about how our inability to receive in the sexual part of our life reflects into our inability to receive anywhere. And it is spot on. It's so true. Once you open up to receiving, you're open to receiving in all areas of life, whether that be, coming into the next point, money, whether that be help, whether that be gifts. There's so many women that I know that are so ashamed when they get a gift, or they feel bad when people get them gifts and they're like, oh, I didn't get you anything and thank you. And they don't know how to receive it and they don't know how to hold it. Once you learn how to receive pleasure and once you work through this part, you find that you can receive in all areas of life. So why can't we receive in that respect? And again, it's sometimes hard for me to talk about this because my examples are so fucking extreme. For me, it was terrifying to receive. Receiving and pleasure is related to pain and suffering and fear and paralysis. And if you haven't heard my life story, listen to the first episode of this podcast. But for me, from 3 years old being sexually abused, pleasure was just so shameful. And receiving was just so shameful and scary. And so for me, that rippled into, I could not accept help with anything. I did everything on my own. I ran myself into the ground with businesses. I had burnout. There was so many things I couldn't do sexually because they triggered me too much. And I just was never in my body because I was disconnected when things like that would happen. I couldn't receive money. Anytime I'd get money, I would spend it straight away. I couldn't hold it because it comes back to this point of worthiness. I didn't feel worthy to receive because there was shame around pleasure and shame around receiving. And again, I have an extreme example of this because of my history, but I think so many women have even micro examples of this that they're still holding on to that ripple into their life. For instance, their first experience around pleasure could have been with a friend, or experimenting with a friend in primary school, or experimenting with a neighbor, or whatever it is. These first experiences, if our parents walked in and they had these big emotional reactions and we felt shame, we learn that that's wrong. If there's children who discover themselves and play with themselves and their parents like, no, don't do that, you're not supposed to do that, and don't touch it, and and they have this big fear response to it, you get embarrassed and you feel shame around pleasure. And so it ripples into, it's this unconscious belief of like pleasure is shameful. Like, how many people will openly talk to you about masturbation and about self-pleasure? Everyone is like, well, don't talk about that. Let's not talk about that. Let's just pretend that doesn't happen. When in reality, like, this is your body. This is your body. You're supposed to feel good in your body. You're supposed to make your body feel good. You're supposed to experiment. It's your own body. You should be able to fucking touch it without feeling weird about it and without feeling weird about talking about that. Like, imagine if we lived in a world where everyone was like, yeah, I had some dinner last night, they masturbated, it was really good and did this. Like, imagine if it was just normal, but it's not because this is just the way that we're programmed. And so I find that it's a little bit more, depends what your friendship group is, but maybe a little bit more common with men. Men kind of joke about it, talk about it. It's a little bit more widely accepted. Whereas with women, it's like, let's just pretend I don't even have a vagina, a vulva, vagina, anything down there until it's time to have sex, and then I'll turn it on. But we're just kind of taught to ignore it and not speak about it and not know that it's there. And when that happens, our ability to receive pleasure and our ability to be in our bodies and feel comfortable in our bodies and accept all parts of ourselves ripples into all these different areas of our life, and it affects our worthiness and our ability to then receive. So that was a huge tangent, but this is part of the reason why we struggle to receive, because we're taught that it's shameful. So I would be looking into, where did you learn that? Obviously, like I said, there's a huge societal element to this, but where did you learn that? Who did you learn that from? How can you reprogram that? And I am working with clients daily, weekly around these beliefs. I have whole sessions around, what's your beliefs around sex? What's your beliefs around pleasure? What's your beliefs around self-pleasure? What's your beliefs around receiving? And a lot of the time it's like, it's not safe to receive. I'm not allowed to receive. If I receive, I have to give. Pleasure is shameful. It's shameful to do X, Y, Z. They have all of these belief systems that they're completely unaware of until we start to dig, that is stopping them from being able to receive. And so we have this feeling, again, I spoke about before, of like, we don't want to owe somebody. That also comes from this shame and from this feeling of fear of like, oh, if I do that, then I'm going to owe them. And we don't want to feel like we're in debt to somebody. That's a very specific feeling as well. If you feel like when you give, you then owe somebody something and you're in debt to them, that started somewhere. That doesn't come from nowhere. So I would be looking at, if that's you, I'd be looking at, okay, why do I feel like I owe this person? Where did that come from? Where do I feel like it's not safe to receive because then I have to give? And again, childhood, toxic past relationships where if you wanted something, you were shamed for it. There's looking into, where does it come from? Where did I learn that? Where did it feel most unsafe? And those moments will start to come back to you, which then allows you to start to heal. The last part here is something that I'm so familiar with. And this is that we can get into this pattern where we overgive and then it's followed by resentment. So what happens as women is, when we struggle to receive, we often are caught in this pattern where we overgive. And so because we can't receive, we just go, oh, no, I'll do that for you. I don't really feel like having sex today, but let's just do it. Or I'll just do this for him. I'll just do this for them. I'll give and give and give to my friends and family and everybody. And what happens is, because we're unable to receive, we go into, if you think about shadow work, if we have a part that can't receive and we push that part down, the part of us that gives becomes overexpressed. And so when it becomes overexpressed, this part that wants to receive gets resentful and it gets angry and it gets frustrated. And I see client after client after client who are frustrated by their pattern of overgiving or of people taking from them. They're like, this person just is a taker. Everyone takes from me. Everyone takes. And my first question to them is like, well, why do you keep giving? Why do you keep giving to these people? How often do you give back to yourself? How often do you put back into yourself? How often do you ask for help? How often do you put pleasure and time and love and attention back into yourself? And their answer is always never. Never. I never do that. I can't do that. I feel guilty doing that. So it's like, is it a problem that they take, or is the problem that you keep giving and that you don't give to yourself? And that's a you pattern. And how do you stop that? And so I was like this. I was an overgiver, and I'd give and give and give, and then I'd snap. And then I would be so resentful, and I could count everything that I'd done for that person because I was like holding on to it, because I was giving when I didn't have anything to give, and I was counting it all, and then I'd get resentment, and then I'd be like, nope, and I'd stop giving altogether, or I'd cut that person out of my life because I'd be like, they're draining, they're taking, instead of just creating boundaries and just giving back to myself and learning how to say no. And so the way to break this pattern is to just stop overgiving. And it sounds simple, super fucking hard to actually do if you're an overgiver and this is your pattern. So first of all, you have to be aware that you're doing it. You have to be aware. And the first sign is that if you can't receive, if you say no thank you to every offer, if you are constantly giving to people and saying yes even when you want to say no, you are in this pattern. And the way that you can break this is to stop and to just take a moment before you respond, and to take a moment before you say yes. And your favorite saying is just going to be, oh, just let me have a think about that. Just let me have a think about that. I'm not sure yet. Can I get back to you? And what happens is we give ourselves time to process. Is this a yes? Is this something that I feel like I want to do? Do I have the energy to give to this person? Is this something that I just want to do for them because I love them? Or is this something that I feel like I should do? And should is like your least favorite word right now. Should, if it's a should, it's a no. And again, really hard to do because we're like, I should go to this thing because this person did this and this and they came to my birthday and blah, 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 blah. All of the shoulds there, right? But at the end of the day, if you don't have anything to give and you give when you don't have anything to give, you'll end up resenting that person in the long term and sabotaging that relationship. The healthiest relationships that I have with friends and family is where I can say to them, I love you so much, but I just have nothing to give today. Can we move our catch up? And they're like, totally get it, because they have boundaries and they have those same things themselves. They get it. They appreciate it. They respect it. This is a healthy relationship. So you'll very quickly know if there are unhealthy relationships in your life, because when you go to say, I love you, but I just have no energy today, they'll be triggered by it. They'll take it personally. They'll be reactive. They'll blame you. They'll guilt you into coming. They will do everything that they can to try and get what they want, essentially. And so we have to then become aware of, okay, how do we respond to that? How do you respond to that? And you say to them, I understand that you really wanted to catch up and I really want to catch up with you too, but I just know that if I do this, I'm going to burn out and I have to really put myself first. And this comes down to all the way back, if I circle back to worthiness. If you don't believe that you're worthy of rest and of nourishment and of pleasure and of looking after yourself and of putting yourself first, then you're not going to be able to set these boundaries and to say no and to push back and to look after yourself. So we have to work on this self-worth. And where does this lack of self-worth come from? Where did it begin? Why do we think we're not worthy? And then there's a whole set of beliefs around worthiness, which for most women is, I'm not worthy, I'm worthless. And there are moments where those beliefs were created. And this is what I do with my clients. This is what I do day in, day out. We look at, where was that belief created? Where was the moment? We process that traumatic moment. We heal it. We look at the belief systems that are holding it in place and we shift it so that they can believe and know that they are worthy. They were born worthy. Every single person is born worthy. There's no like criteria for worth. If you think about it, it's like, what makes a person worthy? And my interpretation of what makes someone worthy is different to your interpretation of what makes someone worthy. I'm like, well, to be worthy, you have to be da, 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 da. Someone might be like successful. You might have to have this many kids. You have to have whatever it is to be a worthy person. You have to be a good person. You have to be nice. And then someone else might be like, you have to be whatever it is. We have different criteria. So if there's no like universal measure of this is what a worthy person is and this is what you have to measure up to, if we're creating it, it doesn't exist because we can just change the criteria. So I often explain this in the subconscious to a person who feels worthless to help them to understand that it doesn't exist. It's just a combination of their past experiences and the subconscious beliefs that they hold. This is what we do. This is what we shift in the subconscious and work within a session. So we stop the pattern by we stop overgiving. And I've had this experience where I had this, I want to say have, but I feel like I've recently broken it, where I just had this feeling of any time it came to pay, whether it was with family, friends, partner, anyone, I'd just be like, I'll pay. Bip, I'll pay. I felt like I had to just pay for everyone. And one day I was like, why the fuck do I do that? Why do I just pay for people and why do I overgive? And there's friends that I've had where I pay for everything and then later on I found out that they're earning the same amount of money as me, or they've actually got money, and because I had this perception of like they're struggling a little bit, I'll pay for them. Later on I found out that they actually aren't struggling, or I've paid so much that it's become natural to them to just accept it, or they just walk away and know that I'll just pay. And then I get resentment, and then I don't want to pay for that person. I don't want to even be around that person because I felt like I couldn't just be like, hey, can you get it today? I feel like I always get it. Can you get it today? Oh, felt like I couldn't do that. So I would then in the past cut this person out of my life. This is the perfect example of not being able to receive money, help, and over giving. And so what I started to do was just getting really comfortable with being like, let's split it. And if at the start it felt so uncomfortable, but it was like, split it. Or if they were like, I'll pay, being like, thank you so much. And it felt uncomfortable and I hated it at the start, but it became eventually normal. And I find that I don't have resentment anymore. I don't resent people because when they try to give, I receive it and I'm able to receive it. So it's one of those things that it was a really hard pattern to break and it was uncomfortable in the moment. But I knew that to stop it, I had to stop over giving. So my biggest advice is if you know that you're doing it, if you know you're unable to receive and you are over giving, become really aware of it and just when you feel it coming up, lean in and just see if you can say, no, thank you, thank you, thank you. I'd love that. I'd love for you to help me with that. Thank you. And just through practice, literally just through practice, start learning how to receive. So if you know somebody who struggles to receive, somebody who does this, if you feel like you want to work on this, book a one-on-one with me. If you know somebody who struggles, send this episode to them. And thank you again for listening.